Hey, I'm Scott Clancy, leader and coach. I think the world needs better leaders and coaches. I want to learn how to be both. Today, this is part 2 of our 2-part series on trust and following orders. Part 1, I presented some ideas on zero trust, but 100% of people would follow lawful orders. And I asked for your help. Get after some of the solutions and the factors to consider around this. The response was great. And what I want to do today is coalesce some of those ideas, some of the great considerations that people have made, and maybe some prescriptive solutions. Okay, let's start. Daryl had this great idea, and he kind of mirrored that which the Chief of Defense Staff in Canada is saying, General Eyre. What we're searching for is authentic, transparent people learning why they are not trusted. That's very self-reflective. That means that leaders need to be open to the idea and asking those questions of why that trust is not there. Daryl introduced us to the idea of leading from the side. I like this, that everyone and anyone can lead at any moment, depending on what the situation dictates. I like this. Still a member of the team, and every leader needs to remember from a followership point of view that they're part of the team, and what's best for the team will always be what's best for the individual members of the team. That's interesting. But as this applies getting up the chain, if you continue to do that, the best leader at the best moment all the time, in Daryl's mind, that's going to fill in those missing elements of trust. I like that. Lindsay brought to us the concept that when she was working with Expo 86, Jimmy Pattison would engage every employee, top to bottom, around the chain, ask them how it's going, and what can I do to make you more efficient, more effective. He was listening. But he was walking about to understand and engage everyone on his team, top to bottom, large organization. This reminds me of Lieutenant General Rick Finley's concept about leadership by walking about, that you gain more knowledge and tact up just by being amongst the people that are working with you and getting out of our ivory towers. This lays the foundation work of trust. Now, Alain Perrin waded in on this. To him, it was no surprise that people would follow lawful orders, that we shouldn't be surprised by that. But he questioned, my concept of the absolute on no trust. And that, if you dig deeper, there are going to be circles of trust within those organizations. And the more the circles are, the more that you have individual compartmentalized circles of trust, the more dysfunctional your organization is going to be and the less trust. When it gets right down to the individuals or one or two buddies, then those circles of trust are so very small, the organization can't function. You're looking to coalesce these into large circles of trust. In his mind, and this is a quote from him, trust is a speed vector. So there's no dilemma here. You have to take corrective action to coalesce into those circles of trust and instill that trust into a single circle. I think that's very powerful. Now, Manish came in with the idea about power mapping and what are the power dynamics surrounding those organizations where you see that lack of trust. Where and whom hold on to those different elements of power, influence, authoritative power, and the different kinds of power that can be there. How are they expressed? More importantly, trying to understand how they can be shaped. Now, to me, overlaying the power dynamics and Alain's idea of these circles of trust, I think this could be very powerful imagery for organizations and leaders to get after those things, of how to link those things together, how to coalesce those circles and understand the dynamics of power that are influencing inside of those. That was, I think, something that leaders can take away as a tool. Now, Marcus came in and questioned immediately whether or not 100% of people would actually follow orders. They might say that, but they're not doing this. This is a degraded sense of trust will degrade not just the fact that they're going to follow orders, but for how long, and it will even degrade how those things are followed, and that people will hit a wall. I'm done. The dangerous part to this is you have no idea when that's going to be, and this is a direct implication on retention and things like this. I asked him about organizational versus personal trust. Is this an organizational endemic trust thing, or is it a personal trust thing? In his mind, it's both, but that when personal trust is compromised, that specific leader did or did nothing, and that directly impacted my trust. That right there, that was the big thing that was going to influence him or influence most people. And that's what erodes in the circles of trust. Things much faster will erode from there. Chris gave us a couple of poignant examples of how that individual leaders will erode that like instantaneously. That's going to be tough. Now, Marcus provided us some solutions. His solution here is that 4-point solution was, A, push power to the edge. B, you have to have diversity of progression, because if you have diversity of progression, then your leaders are going to be more astute with including everyone. 3, or C, you have to have adaptive career management so that everybody can be, taking in the elements of family, of time, of balance, of all those things that are going to allow leaders to be able to aspire to that greatness. And then you need regular, formal, and informal mentorship. Now, what I like about Marcus's solutions is he's not really talking about leaders. He's talking about what leaders need to do from an organizational point of view, but he's actually talking about the people in the organization as the solutions to establishing trust, as opposed to say, well, we just need, if you push everything onto the leaders, be this, without focusing on how we can enable the people. And Marcus's solutions focus on people. I like that. Now, Jake came in and he questioned, he goes, how about from a leader perspective, what if you're the problem? You're the problem. Will you have the fortitude to move yourself out of the way? And we see a lot of people in a lot of power positions who stay in those power positions for extended periods of time, and they have a detrimental effect on the organization, and they surround themselves with people, that engender that same element of distrust. What Jake prescribed for us is that leaders need to work through humbly and honestly through those times. You have to first realize that you're part of the problem, so that there's an element of self-reflection, self-awareness, but there's also just, like Lindsay was saying, get out there amongst the people, and there's a time when you're going to feel that you've lost that trust. Being authentic, being able to say sorry, to admit errors, and still lead. These are going to prove whether that leader deserves to be in that position. Now, Chuck came back and he gave us, that the idea that leaders start with 100% trust. I question him on this. I still like Simon Sinek's idea on this, in that leaders need to give trust at 100%, but they have to earn the trust of the people working for them. I kind of like these. But in Chuck's mind, you're going up or down from that. You're either sustaining that trust or it's going to degrade. And there's a key moment that leaders need to recognize that they've begun to lose trust. And he goes right back to, you have to be out amongst your people. You have to talk to them a lot. You have to be able to sensitize them to the conversation so that you can get honest feedback. And that by gaining trust back and the way in which you go about that realization, and then being honest and open to admit error, or to just even broach subjects and have those uncomfortable conversations, this is going to validate whether or not those leaders deserve to lead. And it's not just actions, it's actions or inactions, that Chuck's talking about that can erode that trust. Bruce rightly corrected me that this was not a dilemma, that I was, a wicked problem, sure, but not a dilemma. Absolutely. He's spot on with that. What Bruce presented to us is that, trust is eroded when those orders are completely unaligned with what the organization is, with the benefit. So when people believe that the orders that they're given are in the best interest of the organization, that benefit the organization, then trust is given at that instant. But if an individual leader is doing something for their own best interests, for the, I don't know, whether it looks good for their bosses or contradicts expressed or written direction elsewhere within the organization, or even the values, then this is where trust fundamentally erodes. Especially if it contradicts that guidance, but also if it demonstrates a lack of organizational understanding from that leader. So there's a credibility issue here. You have to know what you're doing. And this is going to erode trust fundamentally as well. I think Bruce is onto something here. Now, Lou waded in and, again, question that there should be no surprise here about, not requiring trust to follow orders, because there is no requirement for trust to follow lawful orders. That good leaders, so Lou's words, good leaders seldom need orders to get the things done that need to be done. They're using their influence, they're actually leading, and there's a difference there between that, commandy function, directing, versus leading people to those ends. Lou presents the idea that there's some residual trust there anyways, based upon your position and based upon the competence. And people come into these positions and there's at least, okay, well, they're qualified to do these things. They've, got a requisite amount of experience. The idea here, though, is that trust is going to erode very quickly. But in many organizations, now that trust is eroded, now what do? Like Marcus, he questioned my statement as to whether people will continue to follow orders at 100%. It's in his mind, and I think Luke presents a really interesting perspective here, that the threshold for that trust, the threshold where those orders will not be followed, just has not been broached yet. And that the real thing is whether those orders begin to compromise their beliefs or they will be adversely affected by the things they're being asked or told, ordered to do. I like that. I think that's exactly part of the wicked element of the problem here, that you never know when that trust is going to be gone. I think this has a fundamental implication with respect to retention, because this is where we're at. When you're endemically eroding that trust, then the breach is almost instantaneous. It doesn't take very much for me to say, no way, I'm not going to trust this organization. I already don't trust the leaders. Lou introduced the idea of how popularity is becoming a bit of a proxy for trust, especially in the modern digital world. Replacing or usurping trust with popularity. And that there's an endemic or socially cultural lack of trust in elites, seen as being self-serving. I think this applies to a lot of very senior officers in the military context, where there's just an endemic distrust of elites overall. When I think about the circles of trust, when I think about all of the elements involved in these wicked problems, leadership by walking about, being authentic, being self-aware, trying to understand and realize when trust has been lost, and then working humbly to build that back in a transparent fashion and engaging the people you're working with. These are where those solutions lie. I'm Scott Clancy. If you like what you hear, go to www.scottclancy.ca. Let's connect up. You and me. We can build better leaders and coaches.